She sent the message at 2:17 a.m., and it didn't read like anger. It read like closure. I'm not your property. Stop calling me. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. My name is Nolan Prescott. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. The kind of place where silence feels expensive and mistakes feel permanent. I build commercial real estate portfolios, structured deals, predictable outcomes, measured risks. Nothing in my life had ever unraveled this quietly. Her name was Sloane Harrington. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't impulsive. She was the kind of woman who thought before she spoke and meant what she said, which is why that message didn't feel like a reaction. It felt like a decision. I typed my response slower than I've ever typed anything in my life. Understood. I'm not your property either. I didn't send anything else. Not a follow-up. Not a correction. Not an apology. And that silence said more than anything I could have added. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed again. Her name lit up the screen. Not a message. A call. I let it ring. Because something about her text had already shifted the ground beneath us. And I wasn't sure if answering would fix it or make it worse. Before we go further, tell me this. If someone draws a boundary that feels like rejection, do you respect it immediately, or do you fight to understand what they really meant? I met Sloane at a charity event in Paradise Valley. The kind of room where conversations are measured and introductions carry weight. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't need to. She spoke like someone who had already figured out who she was. We didn't rush into anything. We built it slowly. Dinners turned into weekends. Weekends turned into routines. She started leaving things at my place. A jacket, a book, a toothbrush that quietly became permanent. Nothing about it felt forced. But somewhere between comfort and certainty, something changed. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way you could point to and name. Just small shifts. She stopped asking what I wanted. She started telling me what she needed. At first, I thought that was growth. Clarity. But clarity, without conversation, starts to feel like control. I didn't notice it immediately. Or maybe I chose not to, because everything else still looked right. She still showed up, still smiled, still leaned into me like nothing had changed. But her independence started to feel like distance. She'd go hours without responding. Then days where she'd be present but unreachable. When I asked, she said, I need space to think. Space from what? From me. Or from us. I didn't push. At least not at first. But uncertainty does something to you. It makes you read into pauses. It makes you question silence. And eventually, it makes you act. I started calling more. Not excessively, but more than before. Checking in. Following up. Trying to understand where I stood without directly asking the question I was afraid of. And that's when the tone shifted. Her responses got shorter. Then delayed. Then selective. Until one night, I called 3 times. Not back to back. Spread out. And she didn't answer any of them. The next morning, I woke up to that message. I'm not your property. Stop calling me. There was no context. No explanation. No conversation leading into it. Just a conclusion I didn't know we had reached. I sat at my kitchen island staring at my phone like it could explain itself. I replayed every interaction in my head, trying to find the moment where I crossed a line I didn't know existed. Was it the calls? Or was it something deeper that had been building long before that night? I want to work that day like nothing had happened. Because in my world, you don't bring personal instability into professional spaces. But distraction doesn't stay hidden for long. I missed details I normally wouldn't. I delayed decisions I usually make instantly. Even my partner, Reed Calloway, noticed. You're off, he said. I told him I was fine. Because explaining something you don't understand yourself is almost impossible. That evening, I went home and sat in the same spot I'd been sitting that morning. The silence felt different now. Heavier. Not because she was gone, but because I didn't know if she had already decided to leave before she said it. I thought about calling her again. Just once. Not to argue. Not to convince. Just to ask. What happened? But her words stopped me. Stop calling me. There's something about being told to stop that forces you to see yourself from the outside. Not as the person you think you are, but as the person someone else experiences. And I didn't like what that reflection suggested. So I didn't call. Days passed. No messages. No calls. Just absence. But absence doesn't feel neutral when it replaces something that used to be constant. It feels like rejection. A week later, I saw her. Not planned, not arranged, at a restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale. She was sitting across from someone I didn't recognize. Calm, composed, engaged, like nothing in her world had been disrupted. I stood there longer than I should have. Not close enough to be seen immediately, but close enough to confirm it was her. And in that moment, everything made sense in a way I didn't want it to. She hadn't been pulling away randomly. She had been transitioning, emotionally leaving before physically leaving. And I had been reacting to a process I didn't know had already started. I could have walked over. I could have asked questions. I could have demanded clarity I felt I deserved. But clarity that comes after someone has already moved on isn't clarity. It's closure you have to accept, not negotiate. Before we continue, think about this. If you realize someone had already emotionally left before telling you, would you confront them, or would you walk away with your dignity intact? I chose to walk away, not because it was easy, but because anything else would have reduced me to a version of myself I didn't respect. That night, I went home and deleted her number, not out of anger, but out of acceptance. Weeks passed, then months. Life stabilized. Work expanded. Opportunities grew. On the outside, everything improved. On the inside, something had changed permanently. Not in a broken way, but in a recalibrated way. I stopped assuming consistency meant commitment. I stopped confusing presence with intention. And most importantly, I started asking questions earlier, instead of waiting for answers that come too late. 3 months later, she reached out. A simple message. I think we should talk. I read it once, then again, and then I put my phone down. Because this time, I understood something I didn't understand before. Timing doesn't fix misalignment. It just delays the moment you have to face it. I didn't respond immediately, not because I was playing a game, but because I needed to decide who I was in this situation. The version of me from 3 months ago would have answered instantly. The version of me now paused, considered, and then chose. I replied the next morning. I hope you're doing well. I don't think revisiting this would be healthy for either of us. No explanation, no acquiescence, no reopening of old questions. Just a boundary I finally understood how to set. She didn't respond. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like resolution. Because sometimes, the hardest part of losing someone isn't letting them go. It's realizing they had already let you go long before you noticed. And once you see that clearly, there's nothing left to fight for. Only something to learn from.